Hey guys, Otaku here, back with another Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG tier list. So, we just got the September 25th, 2023 Forbidden and Limited list, and it was very small. For those who haven't seen it, I did make a video, but let's just go over it very quickly. Kashtira Rise Art has been banned, Bestial Mag and Cast Space were limited, and Herald of Orange Light and Salamangreat Great Gazelle are off the ban list. They are at 3. That's it. That's literally it. Now, there's something very convenient about this ban list. It goes into effect the week before I go to my regional, my WCQ, which is in Greenville, South Carolina. So, very convenient that I won't have to see some of these. I won't have to see a certain deck. But yeah, I also added a couple of decks that I realistically left out in the last tier list. The meta hasn't changed severely, but at the same time it kind of has because of one particular hit, and that is Kashtira, a Rise Heart, being banned. A Rise Heart was just a walking macro that had quick effect banish, and every interaction caused him to do his mandatory effect to attach, just prolonging games. So him being gone changes a good bit. It allows certain decks to start shining again and just be a little bit more playable, because they don't have to worry about their resources getting banished constantly. Now, yes, Shifter is still a very live card. However, I do think that a lot of the decks in the format currently don't really utilize Shifter as much as maybe one particular one, but we will get to that. We're going to first go with what's already been established from the Dune tier list, and even this was wrong, of course. This obviously this video is more predictions, and just kind of thoughts on where the format is going to go moving forward. And so, yeah, obviously the best deck in the format is Unchained. This deck came out of left field. No one expected this. Now, everyone knew the Unchained support was crazy, but turns out no one tried to figure it out and prepare for it, so it just kind of came out of nowhere. And it's also just a really hard deck to interact with, because a lot of board removal in modern-day Yu-Gi-Oh! Is destruction, and that is very much what Unchained wants you to do. So it's just a very hard deck to interact with. And not to mention, it doesn't matter if the resources get banished or hit the graveyard. As long as they're destroyed, they're getting their effects. So again, just a very hard deck to interact with, can play through a lot of hand traps, can even play through board breakers at times, and just overall, very strong deck. If anything, if we didn't see that from Pack and Jesse's deck lists, it's just a very strong deck. Pearly, it's definitely still up there in the tier 1. It's a very playable deck. It has very good matchups against many of the top contending decks. The issue is that Pearly does crumble under certain hand traps, like Ash. A well-timed Ash can hurt, and even getting Book of Moon on the Perlily or the Pearly just overall can kill the deck very quickly. It just crumbles under too much interaction. So when you're playing Pearly, you're really hoping that your opponent doesn't have much in their hands. We're going to skip Kashtira for a minute. We're going to go D-Link. D-Link did receive hits on this ban list. Bestial Mag being at 1 and Cast Space being at 1. Unfortunately for, anyone who hates D-Link, that doesn't do much. It hurts the consistency of the deck a little bit. Cast Space is just a crazy card, and Mag allowed them to search just any card in their deck, essentially. Just very, very strong cards. Kills the consistency a little bit. That being said, the deck is still very playable. Very playable. It just means that they can't just keep going down turbo mode and just not give a fuck. They have to, probably think about their plays a little bit better. But overall, I think the deck is still very much tier 1. I don't play D-Link, and I'm still out here coping for D-Link. It's a very, very powerful deck, even after these 2 hits. Kash, get that shit out of here. Kash is trash. Hashtag Kash is trash. No, I'm kidding. Kashtira, as a deck, is still a very playable deck. I'd say, bottom tier 2. It's still a rank 7 turbo. They can still play stuff like Dark Arm Dragon, the Xyz one. They can still play Big Eye. They can still play very many good rank 7 Xyz monsters. They just don't have their boss monster anymore, which is fine. Realistically, though, I think for at least a little bit, we're not going to be seeing Kashtira very often. It certainly won't be making many tops now that its boss monster is gone. And realistically, we could probably even bring Unicorn back to 3, because the problem of the deck wasn't the main deck monsters, it was a Rise Heart. But I think Kashtira is just going to kind of fade away. We've been, Tier had their time to shine, Kash has had their time to shine, now it's time to move on to the next part of the format, which is a healthy format. So I think Kash is still very, very strong and very, very consistent, seeing as they have all their key players still. Fenrir, 2 Unicorn. They still have Pot of Prosperity, Shifter. They still have Birth. They have all their cards minus the boss monster, and they can certainly adjust to that. It's just they're not going to perform nearly as well. So I think bottom tier 2. Labyrinth. Labyrinth was the biggest hot take I ever had. This deck's frustrating, and it's going to be very strong, I think, in once Age of Overlord comes out. And the fact that Eradicator did not get banned, I think this card is going to be really crazy after Age of Overlord, but that is a ban list for or not a ban list, a tier list for another day. I think for now, Labyrinth is tier 2. It's still very playable. It's very strong. I just think a lot of the key players right now, for example, Unchained, has got a lot going for it, because Unchained can very easily pop a board on your opponent's turn after you just set 5. You could set 5 and your opponent's playing Unchained, and they could just get rid of all that pretty quickly. So I think with Unchained shining, Labyrinth is kind of hurting right now. It's still a very good deck. It just has it has bad matchups with a lot of stuff that's in the meta right now, or in the tier 1 slot. Runic, with Kashtira Rise Heart gone, Runic has a little less scares for it, because if their resources were getting banished by a Rise Heart, obviously the fountain is pretty much dead. And if a Rise Heart managed to get like the Raid Raptor attached to it, it was just untargetable. So, you couldn't Curses or Flashing Fire it. It was just very hard to interact with if this Rise Heart became, mega tier. I think Runic is still very much tier 2, very viable. Depends on what you're putting with it. For example, Sprites, and also I forgot to put Sprite down here. Sprite by itself is unplayable. It's more of like, what are you gonna mesh it with? But Runic very much I think a tier 2 deck still. And when I say Runic again, I mean like hybrid Runic, so Runic Sprite, Runic Plunder even. Just overall very strong. And because Fountain is still at 2, it's still very playable. Manadium's still at tier 2. I think this deck's crazy. This deck has a lot of interruption, or it hurts under interruption, but the fact that the Manadium orbs are not once per turn except for one of them, and the fact they can get Baron out pretty quickly before 5 summons, so they don't care about Nib, and then they also can end on like a Bish Vulcan with Crimson Dragon. Crimson Dragon goes into Calamity. This deck's crazy. Like I said, it does hurt under certain interactions, like if they don't get Baron out before Nib can kind of just end their game. Well-timed Imperms and Ashes can really work for to hurt this deck, but the deck does very well at just powering through interactions, and just overall sets up really strong end boards. The only issue I have with this deck is the fact that it can summon Calamity, and Calamity is just an unfun card that can just make your opponent scoop, essentially. Rescue Ace, I think for right now, is still tier 2, or not tier 2. I would go as far as tier 3. Rescue Ace is a very strong card. It's getting good toppings in at regionals, at WCQs, and I think even at the most recent YCS, I got like a top 32 or something. I just think that it doesn't do very well against certain matchups. Now, once Age of Overlord comes out and the Diabell Star, I think is what the archetype's called, comes out, then this deck's going to really shine like it is in the OCG. It's just this deck is really struggling because we don't have Max C, and it doesn't have a lot of the stuff that it would utilize that it utilizes in the OCG. And so again, I think even though it's getting good toppings, it's just not performing very well against certain matchups. Same with Rika. I think Rika's top of tier 3 for sure. We're in a format right now that we're seeing a lot, and I mean a lot of hand traps. They're just not even just hand traps, just a lot of just interruptions and all that. And Rika hates interruptions. Rika likes a format where you can just combo off uninterrupted. And it's kind of, Rika's kind of the same as Unchained, but Unchained just doesn't give a fuck. Unchained would be like, oh, you have interaction? I don't care. Rika will be like, oh, you have interaction? Cool, your turn, pass. Rika Sun Avalon for sure is a very strong deck. It's just, we're in a format that doesn't allow it to shine at its best. Synchrons. I think in terms of Manadium and Synchrons, Manadium is certainly the best way to go when it comes to the Crimson Dragon. Synchrons, they're just not performing. Turns out that you summon Junk Speeder, and then you get ashed or impermed, and you just kind of scoop. You just kind of don't continue playing the game. Now there are people that are running like the Adventure Engine into the deck to be able to get Griffin out to go into Baron before 5 summons. So you don't care about Nib, you don't care about Imperm, you don't care about Ash. Overall, just the deck again, it's kind of hurting. Honestly, I'd go even bottom of tier 3, possibly even Rogue. It's just overall not really doing very well. Branded. Honestly, with a Rise Heart gone, and the fact that everyone is running Crossout Designator, which is something that Branded runs now, I would go bottom of tier 2. Branded's kind of seen some love. Branded Chimera is a thing, but we'll talk about that later, as you can see in the bottom left. But Branded Pure, like Branded Despia, all that, overall, I think with a Rise Heart gone, the deck doesn't have to worry nearly as much. Because, yes, they could play through a Rise Heart, they could play through Shifter, but overall, they don't like to. They can definitely make a good board, but there's just, you don't want... It's a graveyard deck. We want our resources in the graveyard, and if they're not in the graveyard, we're not having a good time. So, Exosister, I think Exosister at this point is going down to Rogue. It's just not performing. It's getting outsped by many, many other decks. And just overall, same with Math. Math, both, these are both very strong decks. It's just a lot of the other decks right now are just outspeeding it. Overall, right now, the rule of thumb is kind of who can play well against Unchained, who has a chance against Unchained. And realistically, Exosister doesn't stand a chance, and Math can, but they have to earn it. Heroes, I'm still in the boat to say that Heroes is definitely tier 3. They can play very well against Unchained, and just turns out, you summon Plasma, DPE, and then you activate Rivalry, and your opponent just kind of sits there like, I don't know what to do. So yeah. Rogue, honestly, most of these guys kind of stay here. Swordsoul has the chance to maybe become tier 3 because now that a Rise Heart's gone, they do like their graveyard. They like banishing stuff, but they like being in control of doing that. I think it has the potential, but it's going to stay in Rogue right now. The Birds. Any format, the Birds are good. It's a bad format. I think Flu just got a topping. I'm pretty sure it just took the recent YCS, like first place. This deck has a really good Unchained matchup. It had, honestly, actually, I'd go as far as say tier 1 easily. Flu has a very good Unchained matchup. Any deck that relies off Link Summoning, this deck just stomps. And Unchained is one of those decks. And sure, they don't have the Stormwind statue, but like they can just... Flu players are playing a more aggressive build anyways. And not to mention, this is a very budget deck. I would go as far as say, if you don't have this deck and you're interested in playing it, and you want a deck that can very easily contend against Unchained, this is your deck. The reason also, not to mention this, like another reason this deck excels against Unchained is because Unchained runs the DDD package. Caesar specifically, negates cards that special summon. The Birds don't special summon. When you hear normal summon Robina, you're going to continue to hear normal summon for the rest of the duel. The Blue Dog of Rage or whatever, actually the Link 2, I believe, also, again, targets a special summon monster. Like, realistically, Unchained has a hard time interacting with the Birds, and I think overall this deck's gonna continue to shine. Not to mention it can run Shifter, which is incredibly annoying. But hopefully we don't see that become a trend. And if we do, ban Shifter. I also forgot to mention like Gold Pride Punk, bottom tier 3. Vanquish Soul, top of tier 3. Vanquish Soul I think has like bottom tier 2. Vanquish Soul is still very much performing. It's a very consistent and strong deck. It's just it doesn't like certain interactions or interruptions. And now that Arise Heart's gone, it doesn't worry too much about its graveyard not existing. Gold Pride Punk, it's a very strong deck. It's very good. It's just being outsped. Ironic, I know, but it's being outsped by just so many other decks right now. And the fact that Gold Pride has stopped getting support and Punk at the current moment hasn't gotten any support, it's just, it needs some work. Now, if you're looking for a good Gold Pride Punk list, look at Phantom Knight Gold Pride Punk 60-card pile. Interesting deck. And can set up some really crazy shit. But back down to Rogue. Altergeist, wouldn't even call it Rogue anymore, honestly. I would just kind of take that out of there. Sky Striker, yeah, I'd still say Rogue. With Arise Heart gone, the main graveyard deck itself, Dark Ruler, certainly moves up in the Rogue status. It's a lot more playable. The issue is that Droll and Shifter still exist. And Shifter, again, is not going to be nearly as relevant, but Droll is, yes, no longer really being played in the main deck, but it's still seeing a lot of play in the side deck, and Dark Ruler just doesn't like Droll. Dark World can still play through Shifter to an extent, but it can't play through Droll, unfortunately. So, again, it moves up in, like, the Rogue status, but it's still down there because there's only 2 cards in this format that can kill it. And then Dinosaurs, Dinosaurs is a good deck, and I realistically wouldn't put it in Rogue, but I'm going to keep it in Rogue because it's still a very good deck, very consistent, and if, you walk up into a regional, you might get a decent placing, not necessarily a top 32, but you'll do all right with dinos. All right, on to the guys and gals that need to be mentioned for sure. We're ignoring Altergeist here. Chimera, easily tier 1, easily. Chimera's being run with the likes of Runic and Branded and even like Tri-Brigade, and the deck is just kind of outdoing what everyone expected it to do. It sets up a really good board. It can play through it can play very well through interactions like Ash Blossom. Unfortunately, the deck is kind of one of those decks that needs its normal summon, and it can brick if you just have a bad hand. However, again, best case scenario, this deck can rip on one turn, most likely like 1 or 2 cards out of your opponent's hand. 3 if they ash you and you have tactics, and then you rip a card, summon Chimera, rip another card on end phase. It's just a very good deck. Not to mention, it's very fusion based. The spell card is a quick play, and it can run Super Poly. So it's very strong. It has a very good matchup against Unchained in the sense that Super Poly can get rid of the board. And if you do your popping your destruction effects better, if you well time your destruction effects, Unchained will have to certainly think. But overall, it's just a very strong deck and easily a tier 1. It's earned its place up there. Plunder. With Arise Heart gone, again, Shifter exists, I know. With Arise Heart gone, decks that like to hit the graveyard, aka Plunder, can certainly see a lot more play. I would go as far to say that Plunder is like easy tier 3. Plunder, even in the last format where Arise Heart was legal before Nationals, Plunder was still getting top 32 placings at regionals and stuff like that. It's just a very strong and consistent deck. You see it with the likes of Runic and Adventure. The Adventure engine arguably is the better engine, and it's very, very, just very fun. It's a very fun deck. Also very budget. If you're looking for a good deck to pick up, Plunder is the deck to pick up. The Adventure engine has been reprinted into Oblivion, and all the Plunder cards except for Blackbeard and Black Eyes are in Ghosts from the Past Season 2. So they're like 3 cents a piece. So if you're looking for a good deck to pick up, Plunder is your deck. Salamangreat. I'm not too familiar with Salad Great. I know it just recently got some good toppings. I'm gonna, ignorantly say tier 2 because again, I don't know too much about the deck. I do know that it has some very predictable end boards. However, I do know that it also can play very well against back row decks, like Labyrinth. And like I said, it has gotten some toppings. It got that new support. Gazelle is off the ban list. We possibly will see this deck continue to excel because two things this deck was not a fan of was Gazelle at 1 and a Rise Heart existing. But other than that, like I said, I don't know the deck very well, so ignorantly putting it at bottom of tier 2. And then the elephant in the room, Tearlaments. A deck we have been dealing with since Power of the Elements back in 2021, 2022, something like that. We've been dealing with it for a while, and it stopped existing when a Rise Heart started existing. With a Rise Heart gone, the deck is still very powerful. With all of its limits, its couple of its bans, the deck is still very powerful. And even with Age of Overlord, this deck's going to actually get even better with the Horus cards. For now, we're going to say tier 3. I think this deck is going to move up in status from the Rogue to very much a playable deck. I could be even wrong here, and it can move up to tier 2. It's just a powerful deck. It can be run in so many things. It has 1,000 flex spots since all of its monsters are at like 1 or nothing. So we're gonna definitely see this deck excel now that a Rise Heart is gone. Shifter exists, but Tearlament was existing in Tearlament format, and Shifter existed then as well. So I think this deck is going to continue to say, I don't give a fuck. But yeah, that is my post-September ban list tier list. Again, this is all subjugated to opinion and thoughts. The only obvious one here is that Unchained is the best deck in the format. But other than that, this is all very much just opinions because, it's going to take a minute for the format to be figured out. And then obviously Age of Overlord will come out and we have to figure that shit out. But yeah, so let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. We are very close to 1,500 subscribers. And with that, I'll see you all in the next video. See ya.